Be aware of your mortality because it's what makes life meaningful. But also don't be so constantly infatuated with it, though, that it makes your life unlivable. But whether you live 20 years or whether you live to be 120, what's 120 years against the backdrop of eternity? It's nothing. It's a vapor. It's a speck that appears and then just disappears like a flicker in a dark room. And so what makes it valuable is that we know we only have so much time. And then hopefully we'll internalize that in the proper way. Not in the way that then we lay around and just go like, well, then nothing means anything. No, then why bother doing anything? And then hopefully if you ever ask yourself that question, you're going to put just as much time into answering it. Why bother? Oh, why bother? That's a good question. Why bother? Let me see if I can answer that question and find a reason of why we should bother. And within that why bother, you find your meaning in your life. You find your purpose for going on. You find the why. And if you have a why, then you're going to come up with a how. I feel like it would drive you crazy. I mean, like literally insane to know how and when and where. Because imagine if all of a sudden you get a vision that said you're going to die May 5th at 9 a.m. in the hallway outside. What would you do if you were rational? No, be there. No, be there. When I'm teaching boxing, for example, or teaching Muay Thai, or actually it's any combat sport, students will ask me sometimes, well, coach, what do I do if, someone throws this combination? Or what do I do if someone's choking me like this? How do I get out of it? And I always tell them the same thing. Best advice, don't be there. Don't be there in the first place. If you're not there, you can't get choked. If your face isn't there, it can't get punched. So I imagine that if I were told I was going to die at 9 a.m., so I've got 1 minute and 3 seconds left now, in this hallway on May 5th, I probably would have called in sick today. Right? Arms folded and like, haha, I beat death. But the very second I make that decision not to be here, that would be updated, wouldn't it? So now it would say, nope, not in the hallway, in your bed. Oh, well then I'm not going to be in my bed. I'm going to be at Target. Oh, updated, at Target on May 6th. Okay, then I won't be at Target on May 6th. In other words, every time you make the decision to not be somewhere, your death gets updated. And then you might be thinking, well then at that point maybe I'm going to say, well then I can constantly put it off, but that means that your mortality, your death is constantly on your mind. And I wonder at some point when death doesn't just say, okay, fine, 8:59, 47 seconds by a meteor strike in your classroom. And what? Boom, and then the thing hits you. In other words, it is inevitable. You can't get around it. And I feel like if I knew when and where it was going to happen, then I would, constantly have it in my mind. And so it's a good thing and a bad thing, because it is good for us to be aware of our mortality, because your mortality is one of those things that keeps you alive. You don't want to be constantly dreading it though, because then you have then you lose the ability to live. And so be aware of your mortality because it's what makes life meaningful. But also don't be so constantly infatuated with it though that it makes your life unlivable. So for example, this is a strange thing for us to get our heads around, but really conceptualize this. If I were to walk in here and say, okay guys, today we're gonna play Monopoly. I put out the Monopoly board, I'm like, oh, okay, yay, and I sit, I let you pick your piece first, we start to divide the money up, and then as soon as you're like dividing the money up, I start putting hotels on all the properties. You would probably ask me, what are you doing that for? Oh, because that's one of the ways you can win. So I want to make sure I win. So I start putting the hotels out on all the properties. Like, you can't do that. Why not? It's against the rules. I don't care about the rules. Screw the rules. And then like, well, if you're going to play like that, well then I'm going to keep all the money. Okay, fine. Go ahead and roll. And the very second, of course, that you roll the dice and you land on one of my properties, I start taking your money. And you'd be like, well, that's not fair though, because you did this. In fact, forget it. I'm going to put houses on top of your hotels. And what that now means is that I now own your hotels and the housing units on top. So then, and then as you explain this, I start taking all of your money away. how long is that game of Monopoly going to last? In fact, it's not even a game anymore. Now it's just a free-for-all. One of us is going to flip up the board and go, I'm not even playing. The thing that makes Monopoly interesting and entertaining and even worthwhile are the rules. The fact that there are parameters that you have to live within, that you have to play within. It's the exact same thing that makes life so valuable, is that there's parameters around it. If you're going to live forever, I mean like all of eternity, then how much does today matter? Not even a little bit. How much does almost any tragedy matter? How much does almost any good time matter? How much you're going to have billions and billions of friends in the course of your lifetime, humans and aliens or whatever. How much does each person matter to you? When you have an infinite set, things just don't matter anymore. It's the rules that set up the parameters around life that make it valuable. The fact that we know we're only going to be here for, what's the most, 100, 120 years? If you live to be the oldest person to ever live, then you'll live a very long time, I guess. But even then, a long time is not really that long. It's a relatively long time. But whether you live 20 years or whether you live to be 120, what's 120 years against the backdrop of eternity? It's nothing. It's a vapor. It's a speck that appears and then just disappears like a flicker in a dark room. And so what makes it valuable is that we know we only have so much time. And then hopefully we'll internalize that in the proper way. Not in the way that then we lay around and just go like, well, then nothing means anything. No, then why bother doing anything? And then hopefully if you ever ask yourself that question, you're going to put just as much time into answering it. Why bother? Oh, well, why bother? That's a good question. Why bother? Let me see if I can answer that question and find a reason of why we should bother. And within that why bother, you find your meaning in your life. You find your purpose for going on. You find the why. And if you have a why, then you're going to come up with a how. If you have a reason for doing something, you're going to find a way to do it. If your reason for doing it is solid enough, if it's strong enough. Why wake up every day, leave the house when it's still dark, to go to a job that you maybe don't care for or that doesn't provide a lot of meaning for you or a lot of satisfaction for you? Maybe the reason that you end up doing it is not just so that you can pay rent, but because you can pay rent for a family and you're taking care of a family. And if that's your motivation for doing it, calling in sick is never really an option. I'm too tired to go in today. There's no too tired to go in today because you have people depending on you. And it's people that you've chosen to bring into your life. A spouse, children. It's a type of suffering, it's a type of responsibility you've chosen. And those are the best kinds of responsibilities to fulfill, the ones that you've chosen. And not just because you can blow them off whenever you want to, although, of course, a lot of people do that. They make a family and then they blow it off. I was listening to this morning to talking, somebody mentioned Robert De Niro, if you guys know who he is, he's an actor. And they point out that the guy's been married and divorced, married 4 times, divorced 3 times. And he has children in each of the marriages. And his kids are kind of screwed up. And it wasn't anything that they said in the podcast, like, oh, his children are screwed up. You just kind of look at them and you go, wow. Well, then how could they not? They don't have those figures around them. The guy's got 4 families. How can he possibly put himself into any one of the 4? Putting money into it is not the same as putting yourself into it. Not the same as putting your time into it. And so when you realize that the problem of life is not that there's nothing to do, it's that there's just too much to do. So now you have to be selective. What responsibilities do I choose? Do I choose a family? Do I choose my job? Because there's a finite amount of time. You can't do them both 100%. Whatever minutes you put in your family, you can't put into your job, which means your career is going to suffer. Whatever minutes you put into your job, you can't put into your family, so your family's going to suffer. When they talk about finding a balance, understand what that therefore means. You're not going to be great at either. You're gonna have to divide your time between the two. So the question of it is, what percentage of balance you're going to put more time into and less. And again, the problem of life is not that there's nothing to do, it's that there's too much to do. And you might think like, God, if I didn't have to work though, I could do all these other, you wouldn't do nearly as much. Anybody ever have like these massive plans for break? I'm gonna, I don't know, clean my room, or I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna start going to the gym, or I'm gonna start doing, and then you find yourself on break, and all of a sudden break is over, 3 weeks have passed, 6 weeks have passed, and you're like, what the hell did I do with my life for the past 3 weeks? Or you get a few days into it, and you're bored off of your mind because you keep thinking like, if I had more free time, I'd enjoy it, but then you realize when you're just bored, because there's too much time. And that's just because we don't really fill it with the things to do. There's lots of them. There's lots of them. But the things that you can't control, those are the things that start to bother us. And it's an interesting thing, because think about all of the things in your life that you can control. And have you ever noticed that the things you can control then therefore contribute to things you can't control? Like, for example, you might think, oh, I want to get into university. I don't know, name a university I want to get into. And you might think, I want to work really, I want to get into one. And then once you apply, it's not in your control. It's in the control of the people who are making the decision. But think about all of the decisions that you could be making all along the way, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, to influence that decision. There's a lot that you can't control. There's a lot that you can too. There's a lot that you can. And we focus so much on the things that we can't control. Why? Well, because then it almost alleviates us of the responsibility. And then we feel like if I fail, it's not my fault. It's the fault of whatever thing I couldn't control. It's them. It's that person over there. It's that group over there. It's them over there. If a problem in your life is you think there's no opportunities, no one's kicking you out of the library. I've never seen the librarian kick you out for reading too much. I've seen them kick people out because they're causing a ruckus and being an annoyance and damaging property. But I've never seen the librarian kick people out for reading too much. Your boss is not going to fire you for just working too hard, being too efficient. They'll fire you for other things, though. And so focus on the things you can control, because there's so many you can't. You can't control, you can control your, how about this? You can't control your, you can control your health until you can't. Meaning that maybe you can't control the fact that you have diabetes right now, if you're in your 30s or 40s. But you could have controlled whether or not you got it based off of what you ate and how you exercised the past 30 years, 20 years, 10 years. Once you got it, well, now you can't control that, but now you can control what you do with it. You can't control whether or not, who else applies to a university, but you can control whether or not you're the strongest applicant that you can be. There's so much that you can control, but we relinquish it because, well, I've already said. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Need. Happy Monday.